Did you know that in all of the animal kingdom, there is only one species that fantasizes about sex? And have you ever wondered if your little slice of that fantasy pie is realistic or not? Or if it even really matters? Hi, I'm Rick Higgins. Welcome to Mastering the Second Half. And today, we're talking sex again. This time we're talking about fantasies though, mostly kind of what's in our head, not what's over in our beds. You want to know another unique feature of humans? We're the only species to rank and rate sex. Great, good, bad, meh. We rate them. Other animals don't. And typically we base the rating on our sexual experiences based on how well they matched up to our sexual fantasies. Or to put that another way, you, I, everybody, we tend to become very disappointed when our actual sexual experiences don't quite live up to our fantasies. And we're also just giddy with joy when they do. A lot of this has to do with our ability to plan. A lot of the other animals in the mammal kingdom, well, they either live in the moment or they're just kind of living on autopilot. You and I, we can set goals. We planned on when we lost our virginity. We plan on when we're going to have sex on that next date with that person or persons, depending on your situation. We are really, really good at planning. So generally speaking, what determines how realistic our fantasies are? Well, time and maturity go a long way towards that. After all, we had to spend a lot of our life learning who is and who isn't in our league and what it is we should and should not do. Things like cheating don't work anywhere, even in a fantasy. Fantasy or reality? Part of growing up and adulting is learning to manage and set your expectations and perhaps changing your mindset. If you're the type of person who is constantly disappointed because nothing ever matches your expectations, well, take that into consideration when you're designing your own fantasy, because it is to be enjoyable. So set the expectations, set the realism level in your fantasies so that you're not absolutely disappointed when your brain can't fill in the blanks. Because sometimes good enough is good enough. And yeah, I know I'm preaching good enough here, but stick with me a second because you'll learn what good enough means in a minute. Even the greatest sex in the world can be kind of depressing because it doesn't last forever. And it really is kind of sad to have to go back to reality. So we try to repeat it, but it's never quite the same, is it? The second time, third time, the 20th time. Damn, I'm really depressing myself now. Okay, time to get back to fantasies and count them, 5 tips to get your fantasy game back on track. Tip number 1 for a great sexual fantasy. Masturbate to your mind instead of porn. Seriously, fantasies are not real. I know that. Well, they're not real yet. But their effects on your partner's sex life in the real world, well, they're very real. It is easy to open up that laptop, fire up Bing, and enter some magic search words in. So much content, so much wonderful, and I don't even want to know what you're typing, by the way, especially you over there. Just keep that to yourself. But instead, use your mind, because your imagination is so much grander and more powerful than anything that Bing can deliver to you. Oh, and another great reason to perform the act while you're in your own mind, your real sex life is going to get a lot better because you're going to get to know yourself a whole lot better. Tip number 2, know that there are no rules in your fantasy. They can involve any one person or any multiple persons. That is completely up to you. Your fantasy world knows no bounds, but there is that one exception. There is an unspoken rule that you don't share your fantasies with your partner if they involve someone else other than your partner, unless that kind of shared fantasy is cool with the two of you. A lot of times when you talk about being with someone else through the person you're with, it can lead them to be, well, not very happy, really insecure, really wondering if they're doing enough for you. So the one and only rule is to be respectful in the real world. Know your partner, know yourself, know the limits, and be kind. Tip number 3, Remember to engage all of your senses when you're creating your fantasy. Remember when I talked about masturbating to iHeartPorn.com in a previous tip? Well, when you were doing that, you're basically engaging your eyeballs, your vision, or if you had the sound turned up, well, you got some audio too. But what about your other senses? What about smell, taste, touch? By letting your imagination just go free and using all of your senses. And in fact, feel free to make up a couple senses because after all, this is your fantasy. So read minds too or something while you're at it. But by using every single one of your possible senses plus some, your fantasies are going to become hyper realistic and they're going to be custom suited just to you. Tip number 4. Feel free to add in some stuff that's not sexual. Yeah, if you're pressed for time, skip right ahead to the good parts, if you will. But if you've got more time, why not fill in some backstory? Why not, how did you meet? How did you get there? Who is what? There's so much that you can add into your fantasy. Make it a giant production like Avatar. You know, like Avatar and Blue People. And am I the only one who really kind of digs blue? Anyway. Yes, the sex part can be great. It better be great. This is your fantasy. I don't know why you would be fantasizing about not great sex. But there are also other great parts too. There's the dinner, the drinks, the dancing, everything that you've done that leads up to it. The conversation, how you met, and what you did afterwards. There is no limit to what you can do within your fantasy. Tip number 5. A lot of people's fantasies don't drift very far away from their actual real sex life, but some fantasies do. This is your fantasy, so remember you can bring in aspects of the real world if you really dig them and you and your partner are kind of good at them, but know that there are no limits, there are no mistakes, there are no failures, unless you kind of like that stuff. You can create anything you want to do. This is your fantasy. Now I know this sounds an awful lot like another tip where I said there are no rules, but it is slightly different. There are no limits to what you can do, where you can do it, or how you can do it. Remember the Avatar thing? Okay, here's a bonus section for you. You might find it fun to play around in your partner's fantasy playground. Where do your fantasies overlap? Do they turn you on the way they turn them on? Or if they don't, do you at least understand what is going on that gets them going on? As you and your partner are sharing your sexual fantasies, be very, very clear about what you just want to talk about and what you might want to try. I mean, sexual talk is a perfectly fine arena to play in. Everything doesn't have to have the act of sex to be great sex. So let's get back to the title of this video and the big question. Are your fantasies realistic or are they not? Well, it doesn't matter. It's not a game plan. A fantasy is not a script for you to engage in real life. Well, it can be, and work on that if you really want to, but are they realistic? Are your fantasies realistic? Well, God, I hope not, and I hope they give you a lot of pleasure. And with that, be happy, be healthy, fantasize a hell of a lot, and we will talk to you real soon.